This is a Dubai Eye 103.8 podcast. You're listening to the UAE's #1 talk radio station.
This is Afternoons on Dubai Eye 103.8.
You're listening to Afternoons with Helen Farmer podcast. I'm Poonam Verma. On the show today, I talked to one lady who, due to her lifestyle, has now ended up in a wheelchair. But was it just her lifestyle? We're joined by Dr. Michael, who is going to answer all those questions about taking care of your back and your spine. Also, sober yoga girl is with us. Alec McRobert changed her whole lifestyle after she found out that going to brunches was actually numbing the pain of depression and her bipolar disorder. She's now helping others get sober. Now, long COVID is big in the news. So many people are struggling with it, and we find out how it affects the gut. We all want to stay looking young. We all want to feel young. So we're going to be talking about anti-aging. Should we just accept it or should we be fighting it? And we're talking about diabetes with Glucare Health, an holistic way to manage your diabetes.
Healthy habits.
So last week, myself and Milani met a lovely lady by the name of Leslie Pablio. She's a photographer and also works in PR. Leslie is in the studio now. She is in a wheelchair. And when we met, I never asked her why or what happened. My first assumption was that maybe she'd been in a wheelchair for many years simply because she was just so positive. She was very happy, smiley, vibrant. So I just assumed it'd been going on for a while, this situation. But when we were sitting and having dinner, she mentioned something about being this way for only about a year or two. And that's when I got a little bit curious and I started asking her purely to understand her situation, because I know many people probably wouldn't. But I wanted to have that connection with her and find out more. And she seemed quite open to talk about it. And when I find out how she thinks she ended up in a wheelchair, I was a little bit shocked because it's something that I thought maybe could happen to any of us. And can it be prevented? Are we not taking care of the basics when it comes to our health and how we move our body? So she is in the studio with us right now. Leslie, thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Poonam.
So you are in your, I won't say your age, but kind of late 40s, early 50s. We'll kind of say it in that way. They can guess. And I know you've had a very active life. Tell us a little bit about your journey, because when Milani met you, she introduced me to you. She met you a few years ago and you were still walking with a bit of support. So let's get a little bit of the backstory. What were you doing to get to where you are now?
As you've said, I'm a photographer for a newspaper, and I'm really active. I run a lot from one end to another, carrying my equipment. Sometimes I fall with my equipment, but I'd rather save my equipment than myself. And that doesn't really bother me, And until the last few years that I started to fall, and I thought that I'm just really, clumsy.
So when you say fall, what do you mean? Give me an example.
I was just walking, and then all of a sudden my knee will just give up. And then I started to fall. So I just didn't, I just didn't mind it. So
did you get it checked?
No.
So
And it happened.
So you ignored it?
I ignored it.
Did you ignore it because you thought, I don't want to know?
No, because I thought, with my job, sometimes we tend to slip,
And when you talk about carrying heavy equipment, what kind of equipment are we talking about? Is it one DSLR, two DSLRs?
I have two cameras from one, from both shoulders.
Two tripods.
Long lenses. And I walk from, the trade center from one end to another, covering assignments. So, I thought it's just like,
So I'm also a videographer, and I would have one tripod, the battery pack, extras, and my DSLR, and I would always put it in a rolly bag. I would never, ever carry it. You were carrying it on your back, right?
Yes, sometimes I'm lazy. I put belt on my waist for flashes or extra tripods because I don't want to get back to my bags somewhere in the press area. So I'd rather carry them all.
Okay, so you were doing this for how many years?
Oh my God, here in Dubai for the last 10 years.
Okay. And when you said your knee collapsed, what other symptoms were you getting?
Getting cramps, and then I'm getting, cramps on my back as well.
Cramps on your back?
Yes,
Right.
really bad. Like when you're driving and you feel like there's cramping on your back. And I thought it's just like,
So you really were just, okay, I'll ignore that one
Yeah,
too.
I
So
ignored
when
it.
was the point when you thought, I need to pay attention? What happened?
During the pandemic.
Tell me.
I didn't do anything. I worked from home, sitting for 12 hours. And then I've noticed that every time I stand, I get this really stiffness on my legs. Then I started to use cane. And from cane, I used walker. And from the walker, I used the wheelchair.
So hang on a minute. When did you finally go to the doctor to get diagnosed?
2021.
So when what did they do? What kind of checks did they do first?
I went first to a non-surgical doctor. My option is not surgery if ever I have a back problem then. And I did all the MRIs and the CT scan, and they find out that I have this bulge and a lot of clinical terms, but mostly I have a bulge disc on my spinal cord.
Is that something that was just naturally growing in your back or your spine, or was it as a result partly due to how you were living your life?
I think how I living my life and a lot of things as well. Not taking care of my body.
Were you eating well, and were you working out, or were you just working and running around?
I'm just working. That's bad.
Yeah. Okay. What was the diagnosis? What's the exact term that they've said it is?
I have spinal stenosis, like
Dorsal cord compression and spine.
compression and spine.
Dorsal cord compression and spinal stenosis.
Yeah.
Okay. And what have the doctors said needs to be done right now? Because you've been in the wheelchair for 1 year.
Yes.
What have they said?
From non-surgical, I went to a surgical doctor. So they said I had to have surgery because I have calcification as well on my spinal cord.
How did you cope with that diagnosis? How did you really take it?
It was really hard because from being an active person and then being in a wheelchair. But I didn't dwell on it. I helped myself. I started calling all my friends and just talk to them because I was really, really going deeper into depression.
It's interesting because when people see people in wheelchairs, people don't always know how to react. I remember I sprained my ankle and I had to go to the mall, and my friend pushed me around in a wheelchair, and I'd be in a lift and people would not even look at me because they were thinking, oh, I don't want to ask, or what's wrong with her? And I could feel it. So do you feel that, or are people just very natural around you and they're okay, especially the ones that have just met you?
My colleagues from the media, when they see me, because I'm still shooting now, they look at me like, oh no,
I know
what happened. They ask, but I don't mind telling them.
How do you cope with the mental health side of it? You're saying the depression. Did you get yourself out of it, or is it a daily practice every day?
To tell you honestly, Poonam, I was depressed for a week. I just don't want to get up, I don't want to talk to anyone, And then after that, I was just like, no, I have to get out of it. So I started calling my mom, my friends, chatting with them. I helped myself, because I know I can only help myself, really help myself.
Yeah, I remember going through a really bad bout of depression, and I was repeating myself. I was feeling sorry for myself, and my mum said, people can only help you so much. You need to get up and do it yourself.
Right.
There's only so much they can surround you. They've got their own life to live too. Right. And it's true, you have to find that inner strength, and it's so tough, especially with the job that you do. Thank God you're still doing the job that you do.
Yeah,
Who's carrying your equipment right now? That's what I want to know.
My husband. And he's pushing me around in a wheelchair.
Bless your husband.
Right.
Well,
at least very supportive.
At least you're spending time together more than with
I
your
know,
husband.
right. I have to be good with him.
I think husbands do come in handy then. Okay, well, we have an expert with us. We have Dr. Michael. He's a consultant orthopedic spine surgeon at the Neuro Spinal Hospital. So, is something like Leslie's condition very common? Because when she started speaking to me, I thought, well, so many of us are always carrying heavy bags. Milani's handbag is so heavy, or equipment. And I remember when I was a student, my friends, they were all 21, said, let's go backpacking. And I said, no. I said, I'm not carrying a heavy backpack. That is not a holiday to me. But people do. Is this diagnosis, like, is her condition partly because of this, or is it something else?
Thanks very much for having me. And it was lovely to meet Leslie outside. It's a complicated question because I think this condition is multifactorial and there's a combination of lifestyle factors. I think there is some sort of a genetic background to it as well, as we know from research and previous experience. But you would wonder whether the onset could have been delayed with maybe a healthier lifestyle or more attention to your own sort of symptoms and seeking help earlier. So it's a difficult question, but I think there is a part to be played by all these factors.
So when you said genetics, what is that? What is something that they would have asked Leslie about genetics if it, let's say, was nothing to do with her lifestyle?
Generally, if I imagine a patient like Leslie coming to see me, I would obviously get a thorough history. And part of that would be the family history. So I would say, did anyone else in your family have similar problems? And if we see symptoms developing in younger patients, then we sort of see a red flag, if you like, saying, this sort of symptom, especially weakness in the legs and things, should not be happening in a younger patient. And you look for a familial sort of thing. Maybe their parents or uncles or aunts had similar issues. And the reason it's important is that genetics does play a role in how the disease affects us, how early it affects us, and how severe it could be. And Leslie's particular diagnosis is one that we associate with some form of a genetic change. It may be it runs in the family, or it may have occurred as a new change to her genetics spontaneously.
Did they ask you this, Leslie? Did they discover anything?
For my family? No, I don't have that in my family. Bad posture. Yeah, my grandmother.
Bad posture?
Yeah.
You see, so if she's been tested for that, I'm trying to think, like, realistically, is it the way that she's just been walking and carrying the equipment? Because if it is, that's kind of scary because we're all walking around with bad posture and carrying heavy things.
Yeah, so I think as a rule, good posture, proper carrying of anything, including heavy equipment, is very important because I think Leslie's situation may be to an extent unusual. You could even say it's rare.
Okay.
But for everyone with her diagnosis, there may be hundreds of patients suffering maybe even similar symptoms that are not related to any genetic background. It's purely acquired due to the lifestyle that we lead.
So I know the thought of having any kind of back surgery is scary for anybody because it's just your back, It's the way you're worried if something goes wrong. And I said to Leslie when we met, have you tried acupuncture? Have you tried this? So is it worth trying other things? Or with this particular condition, should she be going for surgery?
So I've had the opportunity to briefly look through her medical reports and actually looking at her CT scan. I've not been able to look at her MRI scan yet. But as a surgeon, I do have a bias towards thinking that everything is surgical. But
this is the thing, and that's great because as doctors, you're going to do the knowledge that you've been trained with. But I have done a lot of holistic alternative methods that have worked for me, but I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
So you've seen the scans and stuff. That's why I wanted to see what are the alternatives people in her situation could try before thinking surgery is my last resort.
Okay. So, can I just digress a little bit from this particular situation?
Please do.
If we look at someone who's got back pain, then obviously there are lots of modalities that they should explore before thinking about surgery. And this is right from self-education about the condition, doing small things that can alleviate the symptoms, a healthier lifestyle. All of these can help the vast majority of people with maybe even similar symptoms. But I think in Leslie's particular condition, I think that it has got to a stage where surgical treatment has to be seriously considered, mainly to stop things getting worse and hopefully to get some improvement of symptoms.
So if she was to get surgery, what would the outcome be? What kind of outcome do you think you would give her as a doctor? The pros and cons?
So as you've mentioned already, it's the spine. And that is scary, mainly because the spinal column protects the spinal cord. Now, we've got to a situation here where the spinal column is actually compressing the spinal cord. So we have to very carefully remove the compression without damaging the spinal cord, it's possible, but it has to be done by the correctly trained person with the equipment that is required. So spinal cord monitoring, maybe navigation, to see exactly where we are working in relation to the spinal cord. And I think the outcome, I would generally say to my patients, we have an 8 out of 10 chance of complete success, which means 2 out of 10 patients may have variable degrees of maybe complications, maybe a poor outcome.
Are you in pain, Leslie, on a daily basis or anything?
Yes.
So are you on medication for that, or do you have to do any gentle exercises?
I have medication for that.
So you're on medication every single day?
Yes.
Okay.
Healthy habits.
So, Dr. Michael, as we get older, do our spines naturally change shape, get weaker? I mean, we obviously know we get stiffer because even when we get up, we're like, oh, my back's hurting. When it was, 20 years ago when I got out of bed, it was fine. What actually happens to the back and the spine?
So, as you know, the spine comprises the neck or the cervical spine, the middle bit or the thoracic spine, and the lumbar spine, which is the lower bit that then joins with our pelvis or the hip bones. All these bones are separated in the front of the spine by the intervertebral disc, which I think everybody knows the word disc. So these discs are comprised of a jelly-like center and a tough outer membrane, which keeps the jelly within the confines of the vertebral body. So the aging process, and I often say to my patients, this is like getting gray hair.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all of us will go through this process. Some sooner than others, and we spoke briefly about the genetics earlier.
Yes.
So when the jelly gets dehydrated or the water molecules leave it, it becomes slowly tougher and more fibrous. This is reciprocated by changes in the joints behind the spine, which we call the facet joints. And these adapt by slowly reducing the full range of movement. So, for example, if a joint could move 10 degrees when you were 10, it may only move 5 degrees when you get to 40 or 50. So overall, there is a stiffening, as you say, of the spine, which because it's so gradual, we just get used to it, we adapt to it, and we develop small tricks that can let us do the things that we always did.
You say that. I get my mum sending me, she sends me videos of 90-year-old Indian women doing yoga moves. I'm like, but they're 90 and they can do this. I mean, I've done yoga for 23 years. They're doing moves that I can't. Is it possible if you stay supple?
Yes, so it's, as I said, the body is a slowly evolving thing. And there are measures that we can do to reduce the impact of aging, for want of a better word. If you're very lucky genetically, you could do whatever you like and remain supple throughout your life. But for the vast majority of us, we have to work hard. And yoga, in my opinion, is one of those exercises where you're gently stretching and strengthening your muscles without overloading the bones or the joints. And if it's done correctly and, in the correct frequency, you are much more likely to maintain the flexibility in your body, which in turn keeps your joints and the discs healthy.
So many of us, I spend most of my time sitting down from one computer coming to the studio. We're rushing around, we're slouching in front of the computers. Our necks are down here, looking at our phones. We all need to maintain strong backs and spines. And I think from an earlier age now because of all this technology. So are there any daily exercises, any supplements, any tips you can give us to keep them strong and sturdy?
So again, going back to yoga, and I'm not very much into yoga at the moment. I think I should be.
Every time someone says that to me, I'm like, come to my class, you'll get into it, trust me.
It's a very kind invitation, and I should probably take you up on that. So exercises, essentially, there are two aspects to it. One is the stretching and maintaining the mobility. And the second is resistance exercises to keep the strength in your muscles. Because again, with age, after a certain point, and this is variable again from person to person, your muscles do start getting weaker and you have to actively work towards keeping them strong. If the muscles are strong, they support the spine and you get less problems from the spine.
Yeah.
I hope that answered the question.
Yes. So we're getting some texts in. Anybody who wants to ask Dr. Michael any questions, please do text us on 4001. So Liam says, recently when I've been waking up in the morning, I feel a severe pain in my lower back. Any advice?
So this is very typical of the early symptoms from what we call spondylosis or degenerative change in the spine.
Right.
And again, going back to the gray hair scenario, everybody will get this. And the more stretching and more awareness we have about the spine, the less likely you are to get these problems. But also this sort of early morning stiffness and pain can be a symptom of what we call inflammatory spine disease. So there's a huge spectrum of conditions. For example, the typical one is ankylosing spondylitis. Now this can also be genetically mediated, where the spine slowly gets stiff and it manifests usually in the third decade of life, and the first sign may be lower back pain, which is why I would recommend that if you are concerned, get some assessments done early rather than later.
Yeah, early diagnosis is the most important thing. The more you... Obviously, you know that now, Leslie.
Yes,
Don't
yes.
worry about it. But I've realised that we have busy lives. Sometimes we don't even want to think something's wrong with us. We want to ignore it and it will go away. And it's scary sometimes to know what's going on. But yes, early diagnosis can fix so many things. Now, we've had another text. Minnie says, ever since I gave birth to my second child, I've been feeling something different on my legs that makes me want to move them often. And when I searched it, it shows restless leg syndrome. Does this warrant a trip to the doctor? Is it serious?
So restless leg syndrome, as you've said, is that sort of, it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum where you can have sometimes pain, sometimes a feeling of stiffness, wanting to move it yourself to relieve the pain and stiffness. And sometimes the legs almost involuntarily can twitch or move. And again, I'm to an extent on the paranoid side of the spectrum. And I always think if you have any questions or queries, get it checked out.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the best person to see for these sort of symptoms would be a neurologist. Because again, with my paranoid hat on, this could be a very early symptom of, for example, multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
But 99% of the time, it might just be electrolyte imbalance or bad diet or something like that. But get it checked out is my advice.
When we wake up in the morning, they always say, just do a gentle stretch. I mean, I know the downward dog position in yoga is probably one of the best stretches, but I'm a yoga freak. But is it good to wake up in the morning and just slowly bend and down and touch your toes, stretch up, just basics?
Absolutely. I mean, I usually advise my patients that even before they get out of bed, they should do a bit of stretching. And there are some exercises for the neck and the back that you can do.
While you're in bed?
But yeah, you wake up, you move your neck through a full range of movement, side to side, up and down. You can turn face down and do the same. You can practice lifting your legs up a little bit, sometimes called the Superman position, where you lift your shoulders up. So basically, you're working all the muscles on the front and the back of your spine before you get up. And then once you get up and you're on the floor, you could do the stretches, touching your toes, extending the spine, etc. Yeah. All very gently and slowly.
Swimming, I think, is a really good way of stretching your body too, isn't it?
Swimming is really good, but again, it's very important not to just go to the pool and dive right in. You need to warm up and stretch before you start the swimming. And depending on your style of swimming, it exercises different muscles in the body. And ideally, if you've not done it for a long time, get some lessons, get some advice before you jump into it, literally.
Yeah. We've got another text, no name on here. What are the treatments options for stenosis of the spine? I have two types of stenosis, canal and foraminal. How would you say that, doctor?
Yeah, foraminal.
Foraminal. The latter being more severe. I have pain in both my hands, cramps in the legs. When I stand or drive for a long period, a sharp pain in my chest radiates down to my arm when hunched over for long periods. Any advice?
Yeah, so there are two types of symptoms you can get from the spine. One we call referred pain, and this arises from the joints, for example, and the body has a way of thinking, actually, even though it's arising from the spine, it might be felt in the back of the neck, on the side, between your shoulder blades, in the lower back, the buttocks, etc. The second type of pain is what we call neurogenic pain. So this occurs because the nerves are being pinched somewhere. So just to briefly discuss what we call the anatomy. In the spine, you have the central canal where the spinal cord or the chorda equina runs. And the nerves at each level come out through holes in the spine we call the foramen. And in the lower back or the lumbar spine, there's also an area we call the lateral recess. So these are the areas through which the nerves pass to come out of the spine. And these can be narrowed or get stenotic due to either bony overgrowth, ligament thickening, or a disc bulge or a disc prolapse. So the symptoms very much vary upon where in the spine it is, which part of the spine is affected, and what is causing it. And we've already heard about ossification or calcification causing stenosis.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Michael. We've had more texts, but I think we'll get you back on again and we'll go through that in more detail. So Leslie, right now, where are you? What is your situation? What do you think you're going to do next if if the doctors have said, I think you need surgery? What's going on through your mind?
I will take the surgery.
Really?
Yes. I'd rather do it now while I'm a bit young than having to go 10 years. I'm going to be really old by that time, and I don't want somebody taking care of me.
When do you think you're going to do this?
Maybe in a month.
And when it comes to recovery, doctor, how long do you think that will take?
So if surgery is uneventful and the recovery is uneventful, we always have this caveat. I would say that in 2 months with some rehabilitation, you will be starting to notice a significant improvement. But all nerve recovery can continue up to 6 months or even take up to a year.
Yeah. Okay. Leslie, we wish you all the best. You're always smiling when I see you. And I know it's not easy. I get down, over the silliest things. But sometimes, what they say, God gives you things that you can handle. And I don't know why you've been given it, but I feel that you will come out the other side because you're so positive. I can see it in your face.
Thank you.
So I wish you all the best. And thank you both for coming on the show. Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you.
Healthy habits.
Brunches. That word, brunches. I think that was all I used to hear about when I first moved to Dubai 15 years ago. People go, do you want to come to a brunch? And I think I can safely say I've probably been to about 4 or 5 in 15 years. And the main reason is because I can't eat that much food and I can't even drink that much. So it was also a place where I used to see at the end of the brunch a lot of people intoxicated. And when I grew up in the UK, that was a usual sight on the streets for me. And it never made me feel comfortable. So I didn't really like being around that again. So going to brunches has never been a really big thing for me. But I know so many people here really do enjoy them. And they are pretty amazing, I have to say. But for our next guest, she enjoyed them maybe a little bit too much that it started affecting her life. So much so that she's now created the Sober Yoga Girl podcast. She walked into the studio and she had such a big smile on her face. And she's still smiling now. I want to welcome Alec McRobert. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's go back a little bit. When did you move to Dubai?
So I moved here in 2017. And I remember when I first got here, I was blown away by the brunches, the ladies' nights. I thought it was so much fun. And at that point, I was 25. So it was
At that age, I get it. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about brunches. How often did you go to one? I know it would have been part of your social life and the team that you're around.
Totally. Every weekend, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
For how long? How many years or months?
So the funny thing is when I got here, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm so happy. And then I think I only made it about a year and a half before I was like, I just can't do this anymore.
Okay, so let's break it down. What was actually happening? Because this really started affecting your health, both physically and mentally.
Yeah. So I think I had this persona on, Instagram and social media of having this amazing expat life, all these adventures and travel. But in reality, I was really depressed. I was really anxious. I had 2 credit cards that were completely in debt. And it almost felt like this breaking point. And I realized, I have a great job. I live in an amazing country. I have a beautiful apartment. What could be wrong? And I knew deep down inside of me that it was the partying and the brunches.
Okay, so we had a chat about this off air, and I said there's got to be something deeper here, because I feel, when people over-exercise, emotionally eat, or use work as an excuse, or drinking, whatever it is, there's something more there to the root of it, right? And when we started chatting about it, you did go back a few years. So tell me what it is that you found out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had bipolar disorder, and for me, it was something that the use of the alcohol, in my mind, I thought it was relieving stress. I thought it was making me happier. I thought it was connecting me to people. But in reality, it was preventing me from being in a stable place with my moods. And the amazing thing is that when I quit drinking, I initially struggled deeply. Like, my mental health got worse for like the first maybe 5-10 days. And ever since then, like, most of the symptoms have gone away since I've been sober.
So you're telling me when you stopped drinking, a lot of the bipolar symptoms went away?
So, I mean, I would love to say that it was just sobriety that did that, but there was a lot more to it, right? So I was also practicing yoga and meditating and speaking to a therapist, and I do take medication for it. So there's like a whole picture of different strategies that I'm implementing for my mental health. But I would say sobriety was like the final piece. Quitting alcohol was the final piece to kind of bring myself to that state of equanimity.
You also mentioned as well that you were a teacher and you felt like you weren't doing what you were meant to do, and that also added to a bit of the depression and maybe the overindulgence at brunches and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I discovered my yoga practice early in my 20s, and I ended up following this career of being a school teacher because I thought it was more, of a safe and stable job for me.
For me too. I mean, I wanted to go into media and singing and stuff, and your parents are saying, but you need to get a more solid, stable job. And you do. You think, well, you have to. That's just a bit of a pipe dream sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as soon as I quit drinking, it was about maybe 30 days into sobriety when it was almost like I woke up from like sleepwalking through life a little bit. Like, it was like all of a sudden I could see everything clearly. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I know what my dream is. I know that I want to be a yoga teacher. I know that I want to share this with everyone. And so why don't I just start doing it?
Were you ready though just to quit that stable job?
I mean, I wanted to. I was ready to leave right away, but at that point, I didn't have enough of an income. I didn't have the business established enough yet, and I didn't really have a plan for how I was going to do it. So I did end up staying in teaching for about 2 years after I quit drinking.
So what was the trigger that made you think, after about a year or so, I can't do this anymore? I can't, live this life anymore like this?
So I think it was a number of things. I think I was sort of Googling how to quit drinking. And I had the idea in my head, but I just didn't know how. And I didn't know where to turn to for resources. And the funny thing was that I ended up getting like targeted Instagram and Facebook ads for a community that helped with this specific thing. So it probably picked up my Googling and,
Yeah, it's listening to you.
Yeah, exactly. And then what was magical about this was I was seeing these stories of people who were just like me, a professional, held a job, and drinking was just creating problems for them and they were no longer happy. And so they were sharing how they quit drinking and their lives got so much happier and healthier. And it was hearing these stories of people just like me that made me realize, wow, I could actually do this too. And it might actually make things a lot better for me.
The one thing that happens when you do a massive shift in your life, the people around you shift too. So your brunch friends, are they still part of your life? Did they understand what you were going through? Have they evolved as well?
So my friend group ended up shifting a lot. I think that is it went both ways. Like, the people that I was surrounded with did try to support me as best they could. But also, once I was sober, I just didn't want to be around it anymore. I wanted to be up at 6 a.m. on a Friday, Saturday, going to the gym. I didn't want to be out late at night. And so I did occasionally go to I would go to the Christmas party or whatever event, but I ended up withdrawing a lot myself, and I ended up really shifting my friend group.
Have you got a new set of friends now?
Yes.
Well, you have a completely new life. We're going to talk about that. So don't go anywhere. We will be back very shortly.
Healthy habits.
So I want to ask you, Alex, what was interesting is you self-diagnosed yourself with bipolar. what age did you do that and how did you do that?
Yeah, so when I was 18, I was in a Bachelor of Education program to become a teacher, and one of the requirements was to do a psychology course. And I actually read about it in a textbook. And I knew that it was something that I was suffering with. Like, I kind of knew that I was experiencing depression. And then I read about mania, which is when your mind is overactive and racing and you're making decisions without good judgment. And I read about it and I was like, that's what I have.
But did you get treated for it after that?
So for me, the struggle that I faced was I did seek counseling. First of all, overcoming the stigma of getting into a counselor's office was difficult to begin with.
Tell me about it, yeah.
And then I finally got in there. And the problem for a long time with me was that I seemed like I was high functioning and I seemed well. And I think I did a disservice in that I wasn't telling the truth to the counselors I saw about the reality. Like,
what were some of the episodes, like a really bad one or something that, scared you?
So I was having really intrusive thoughts, and but I didn't want to voice those to the doctors. I didn't want them to know that I was drinking every day. Whenever your doctor asks you how much you drink, you're like, oh,
I don't drink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was really downplaying the situation.
And you exercise 3 times a week, yeah.
Totally.
I see. Okay, so when did you go on medicine for this medication?
So I was put on medication before I moved to the Middle East, so back in 2014, but it was a really low dose. So I was on 25 milligrams, which would work if I were sober, if I were doing yoga, if I were taking care of myself.
So do you think having that kind of life and, drinking and the brunches was a way of coping with your bipolar?
Yes. And I think the combination of, moving overseas, while it's an amazing adventure, it can trigger culture shock. It can trigger overwhelm. You get to a new place and you don't know who your friends are. You don't have your support right away. There's a whole bunch of stressors, even though it's an amazing experience. And if you don't have those supports in line, then it can lead to a spiral.
So that was a pretty brave thing for you to do in the condition you were struggling with, to just move and leave home and leave your family as well.
I think I thought I was in a better shape than I was.
Oh, I see.
And then when I got over here, it really, I got into the party scene, and that's when it really worsened.
Did it numb the depression in many ways?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I always think there's something else, isn't it? We're numbing so many things in our life emotionally that we don't want to deal with. But I'm really glad that, it took you just a year or so. It wasn't 10 years down the road where you woke up, So now you are helping other people. You've founded Sober Yoga Girl podcast, and you do some yoga classes. And one of our friends, Laura here, says, oh, you have Alex on the show. I do her classes online and they're so good. So she's been raving about them. So first of all, tell me about the Sober Yoga Girl podcast. What kind of things do you talk about and what kind of guests do you have on the show?
Yeah, so I started the show in January 2020, and I've had guests all over the world from all different walks of life, all different experiences, for the most part with alcohol. And I think it really depicts that, you can be any type of person, any age, any gender, and be struggling with drinking.
Yeah.
And I think by hearing other people's stories, we get inspired to make changes ourselves, whether it's with drinking or food or sugar or caffeine or whatever your coping mechanism is.
Do you find there's is it more men or women here that are struggling, like in this region, with that?
So I would say I think it's a mix, but I think I resonate with and speak to women mostly.
Yeah.
So the majority that I actually have a community called Sober Girls Yoga, and it's all women that I'm supporting in quitting drinking and replacing it with healthier habits.
It's funny, we had Vanessa on before and she was talking about anti-aging, and she goes, one of the biggest causes of aging is drinking, and it was quite interesting because I really didn't know that. I mean, I just think it's a lot of stress as well. Obviously that plays a part, but she goes, it plays a massive part in the way you look. So you're helping other people and you've got some programs and workshops. Tell me about them.
Yeah, so I run an online community, and what I do is I help women quit drinking for a 30-day period, a 60-day period, or even up to a year and longer. And I run group programs, and then I also support individuals one-on-one. So it's up to you and what you are looking for, whether you want to be short-term sober or long-term sober, whether you want to be in a group or on your own. And then I also just do general yoga classes. So I also have a general yoga community, and that's what Laura is part of. So you're welcome to join me, even if you're not on that sober journey.
And she's now living the life of Eat, Pray, Love, Julia Roberts in Bali, because you're between there and here. So you basically do these yoga classes from anywhere in the world, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I started this business based in the UAE right after I quit my teaching job. So about a year back. And I stayed here for a few months, and then I realized, I have the freedom to do this from anywhere. So why don't I do it from anywhere? So I spend a lot of time in Ubud in Bali. I just spent 2 months with my family in North America. And then I get to have the best of both worlds, because I get to come back to, the yang and the busyness of Dubai, and then the peace of Bali.
I mean, when it comes to wellness and yoga, Bali's energy is just on another scale. So is that just like a great place for you to meet like-minded people and work on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also host yoga retreats in Bali, actually. So people come and join me for a week or 10 days, and I do sober-focused retreats. I also do custom retreats. So if you have a small group or a private group that wants to come down to Bali, hit me up.
I'm obsessed by yoga. I've been doing it for over 23 years. What kind of yoga do you do?
So I originally got trained in vinyasa, but I also teach yin yoga. I teach
yin.
meditation. Yeah, yin is the best.
Anyway, listen, this has been such an interesting story, and I want to see pictures of your villa now in yoga. I just love Bali villas. They're so cute and so natural. But thank you so, so much. And tell everybody again where they can follow you online if they want to join in.
Yeah, so my Instagram is Alex McRobs. That's my personal Instagram. And then the community is called The Mindful Life Practice on Instagram, and Sober Yoga Girl Podcast also on Instagram.
Alex, thank you for coming in.
Healthy habits.
One of the biggest obsessions in modern day life, in my opinion, is trying to look and stay young for as long as possible. We all want to do it. Now, where I grew up, back home in the UK, no one would go for regular facials or get anti-aging treatments. It was like a one-off for a special occasion. And even today, my older family members, they age with grace and acceptance. And it was only when I moved to Dubai that I was suddenly open to this whole new world and obsession of anti-aging. And then obviously you've got the Kardashians, you've got social media, that all adds to it, and Hollywood. I can proudly say that apart from the odd facial, I still have not had anything done to my face. That's not to say there's anything wrong, because many of my friends have had anti-aging treatments. But personally for me, I'm really particular when it comes to putting chemicals in my body and having surgical procedures. So I try and put anything off for as long as I can. But ask me when I'm 70, who knows, it might be a whole different answer then. But what exactly is anti-aging? Is it preventable, or is it even reversible? And why do we have this obsession with wanting to look young? Has it gotten worse since social media started? Well, maybe my next guest can help us. It's Vanessa Emsley, and she's the founder of Well Byness. Hello, Vanessa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I am really, really good. Tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all.
Quite a long story, I suppose. 46 years old. I have lived in Dubai in the Middle East for the last almost 9 years. South African, from Cape Town, and I have a few degrees. And my key one that I'm kind of focusing on now is my Bachelor of Science and Master's, which is in Nutrition, Functional Medicine, and Nutrigenomics. And busy with a PhD at the moment.
Busy lady, and she's a mom as well. Now, according to the World Health Organization, the number of people living past 60 is expected to double by 2050. So naturally, we're living longer. We want to feel and look as young as we can. But what is this obsession that so many people have with wanting to look young? Do we as humans just find it hard to accept that we're aging, or is there pressure from society and the media? What do you think it is?
I think it's threefold. I think we have our own personal, almost kind of like we're worried about our own mortality. So we don't want to look old. We want to look young. We don't really want to age. And nobody wants to look in the mirror and feel, oh, you've looked a bit older today. So I think obviously social media, the types of media we engage with will also influence how we feel about aging. And I think also now what's happening is that there is a huge surge from both business and government entities in the whole longevity space. And the reason for that is it's kind of this big debate on health span versus lifespan. people are living approximately 17 to 19 years longer on average in developed countries. However, they're not living well. So about half of that time, people are sitting with one or two chronic diseases. They are sitting with medical care, so they're needing to be in care facilities. They're on lots of medication. And at the end of the day, there's no point, I think, in living well if you're sitting in a chair looking at the same view day after day. So I think people of kind of our age, we are facing our parents' mortality. And a lot of people come and start speaking to me when they've had to face a situation with their parents. And they're kind of asking the questions, how can I stay younger? Because they don't want to be living this kind of jail sentence of old age. And then just in terms of business, even our neighbors in Saudi, the Crown Prince has launched Hevolution, which is a $1 billion investment company based on taking people from Stanford University, from a whole plethora of businesses around the world to try and find the answers to longevity. And that is quite significant because if you think of people who've got pension funds that are committed to paying out until their death, if you're living longer, suddenly the financial pressure, medical care is just a lot more.
Why do we age? What are some of the main reasons that affect our aging process?
Okay, so there's a lot and they're quite technical. So I'm going to just touch on a few.
It's fine.
We look at 10 different areas. The key one is that everyone sort of knows about is stem cell. Stem cell therapy is used as a medical intervention for aging. But basically our stem cells, which is kind of the origin cell or the source cell, they start to dissipate as we age. We have less of them. And so this is also why we don't recover well from injuries as such.
Oh, that's interesting. I was wondering why that happens as you get older.
Yeah, so your stem cell concentration and activity levels drop off. There's senescence, which is basically when cells forget to die. So our cells in all of our bodies renew themselves over a certain period of time. But in order for that to happen, we need those old cells to leave the room. And when they don't, they start clogging up the system. So senescence and that then sends out different chemicals into the bloodstream, which causes inflammation. So senescence is key. Mitochondria. Mitochondria are basically, this is my PhD topic, mitochondria are basically the source of everything. It's the internal motor, but it's not just the motor of the cell and our energy production. The mitochondria will also help with hormone production, and they can actually sense what's happening in the environment around us. And they just don't work as well as we age, especially if they're toxic. So you said you don't like toxic chemicals.
No.
So more toxins, more exposure to toxins, the sober yoga lady, alcohol, brunching, those sort of things will also be prevalent. DNA instability, protein folding, there's a lot. So out of those 10, there are very different strategies. And this is why there's quite a lot of different solutions in the marketplace and that you come across, and why there's so many different supplements out there or procedures and protocols that are designed to cure aging or reverse bioage.
Now, I want to talk about mindset. Mm-hmm. I'm a massive believer, just by looking at my dad, that he was always very happy, content, positive. He wasn't negative. He was very appreciative from where he came from, what he'd achieved, but he would never gloat. There was just a radiance of joy about him, anyone who was around him. And he always looked younger than his counterparts. And I do believe, they say beauty comes from within. I think your mindset, your perception of life and how you approach life plays a massive part in it. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think, there's that old saying, and I'm not going to quote it correctly, but what we think are the words that we say. The words we say is what we do. What we do is our character, and our character is who we eventually are. We know from scientific studies that people who have a positive outlook on life, even if they've suffered something like a traumatic brain injury from an accident, whether they've been dealt a really tough hand, stroke or something like that, we know that research shows that people who have that positive mindset recover better and even faster than before. And one of the big things that we know is that people in community, people who are in relationships, especially men, they have a much bigger reduced mortality risk.
If they're married.
Yes, than women. It goes the other way,
So
actually.
hang on a minute. You're saying women might die quicker if they're married, but men last longer?
No, not really. The science it depends on pockets around the world, but on average, men who are in a committed relationship will generally last longer
because they're getting taken care of.
Yes, probably. But it's true. It doesn't apply to every single community and social community around the world, but that's kind of your general rule. And that's part of the whole thing of having oxytocin. Oxytocin is your love hormone. You can get it from playing with your kids, stroking your cat, your dog. There are other ways to get oxytocin, but it's been touted with some credibility as being the elixir of life because it helps to calm you down. So that's really interesting. And, there is a study on positivity and how we appreciate things. So as you said with your dad, there was a lady in Canada who did a study on the random acts of kindness. And she wouldn't know what she would have to do that day, but she would either be told, you need to go, and she would take a Post-it note and go put it on somebody's car and say, I hope you have a lovely day. But it had to be anonymous. They haven't seen the same results as if I come up to you and say, oh, I hope you have a lovely day. It's a random act of anonymous kindness. And they did mouth swabs. So they would swab the inside of her mouth before and after the days she did and didn't do this. And they were measuring her cortisol levels. And the interesting thing is, on the days that she did this anonymous random act of kindness, they would see her cortisol reduce into normal zones. And, we need cortisol, but we don't want too much of it. And that's our stress hormone. So just by reaching out, doing something, will reduce your cortisol. So that's part of, having a positive attitude, being kind, caring, and being a good member of society.
I'm a big believer in using anything in the fridge and the cupboard when it comes to facials. I don't like using chemicals. And somebody is with me on this. We've got a text from Mary saying, my sister in the US has the luxury of time to pamper herself when she gave up her 9-to-5 job. And she now uses avocado every day on her face. She's older than me, 5 years older, but definitely looks younger. Is avocado proven to be an effective anti-aging cream, or is it because she just gave up her job?
I think it's probably both, given that it depends on her job stress. I'm not sure on the topical dermatological kind of medical aesthetics part, but avocado, if I'm thinking from a science nutrition aspect, avocado is amazing. It's got monounsaturated fats. It's really healthy for us. And, why wouldn't it nourish and heal the skin? Avocado oil is also
I'm
really
a great
hydrating.
believer. If you're going to put something in your body, whether it's a banana or a tomato, and you can put it on your face.
Absolutely.
It doesn't, honestly, I don't think it even matters. I think anything will work, really. Yogurt, egg, all these kind of things. And also being Indian, we grew up with a lot of this stuff. I actually don't use any products, really. I just make my own little facial packs at home and everything. It's just what I've been brought up with. I'll give you some secrets later.
Yes, please do.
So what about daily exercises and tips? Because I remember years ago, I was at university and I found this old VHS videotape, and it was about facial exercises. And I said, Mom, do this, right? I found it where you do all these crazy faces. I'm at that age now, and you see them all over YouTube. Are they worth doing? Because people spend so much money doing facials and going to get their faces massaged. Is it a movement of collagen in the body or the blood cells?
No, I think it's a lot of that it's just stimulating muscle tension and being able to increase blood flow. So the minute you have more blood flow, you have more oxygenation, you've got more nutrients coming to the skin, which is why not just facial exercises, but all exercise is actually good for us, both at metabolic level as well as, helping our skin and muscles look really good.
Do you know if men's skin elasticity is greater than that of a woman's, or does one age more than the other, or does it depend on diet and stress?
Diet and stress is always going to play a big role, because that's going to affect your genetics make up 10 to 20% of what you are. It's the overlaying of your diet, stress levels, lifestyle that is actually going to express genes or not. And that's what we call epigenetics. So when we're looking at will something change in a man or woman? Well, absolutely. Men have got testosterone, whereas women have got estrogen. And especially when you're hitting kind of midlife menopause, your estrogen drops. Estrogen helps with elasticity. It helps with muscle. Whereas, your testosterone helps men to retain muscle. So there definitely is you can see women suddenly start to age quite quickly once they've hit that menopausal age.
Have you worked with anyone or have any real life cases or testimonials where someone's changed their lifestyle and you've seen dramatic changes?
I've got two. One is me. Actually. I just get the comments, I even had it last night, that I'm just simply reducing my age visibly, skin-wise.
Your skin does look good and you've got no makeup on, I have to say.
Yeah. And that is partly... it's mainly diet, because I don't like putting skin creams on my face, and I use one cream from the US. That's it. That's my entire regime.
I think, keep your skincare simple. I really, really do. I think a lot of people are just buying stuff because it's been marketed, and you don't even need all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one, but more specifically like that is I've actually done glycan age testing, which is deep-rooted kind of cellular aging. And while I'm 46, my glycan age, which it tests your inflammation and aging, my glycan age is 36. So I'm operating at cellular level 10 years younger than what my age is, which is great. So that's me.
Yeah.
But what's quite really, really interesting and where I'm really excited is I'm part of a business venture with two other partners. I've got an Emirati business partner, Russia, Nishat, and an Italian English lady, Lisa Durante. And we've come together. We all love longevity and wellness and health. And we've set up Wellness World Club. And we have very much a scientifically based protocol. I don't do anything unless there's science behind it. Sorry, that's just me and my own OCD kind of persona. We did a pilot study on a 72-year-old gentleman who is very active. He does triathlons. And when I first had a look at his profile, his biological age was already 67. So I'm looking at this going, okay, great. What do I do with somebody who's already tracking younger, which is amazing. But we implemented a longevity anti-aging protocol specifically designed, personalized for him. And in the space of 3 months, I managed to take another 15 years off his life. And he swore at me when I told him because he couldn't believe it. And then he says to me, he goes, but I really don't understand. He says, my beard isn't white anymore. It's gone back to its brown color. And I'm like, yes, that's because your cells have been so rejuvenated that, you've reversed, aging. You've reversed the gray. So we're hoping to roll this. We are rolling it out and setting it up. So that's our longevity, reduce your bio age. And great fun. Really excited on that, as you can hear.
Well, you can follow Vanessa on Instagram at wellness. What is it?
Well by Ness.
Well by Ness.
And then, we've got Wellness World Club, which is Wellness World Club.
Okay, well, I've actually come to terms that I am no longer 25, Vanessa. Physically, that is. Mentally, that's a whole different story. I'm still working on that. And I think my tip to staying young is just remember everything and every one of us are all here just temporarily. Don't get caught up in the drama of life. Enjoy it, accept the highs and the lows, eat well, sleep well, and laugh. Laugh as much as you can, because for me, that is the secret to youth.
Healthy habits.
So So if you ask anyone who has had COVID, you will hear some of them saying things like, I get really tired, I have fatigue. Even the guest I had on yesterday, Phil, said, I just feel tired a lot more than usual, or I can't get rid of this cough. I even had one friend who had fevers on and off for a month after recovering. Doctors couldn't find any reason why she was having them, and I thought, well, could it be COVID? Long COVID. But what do we mean by long COVID? It's basically after effects of having COVID that still linger in the body. But now researchers in the UAE have also found that some bacteria in the gut may actually impact the severity of COVID-19 infections. So to find out more about this, joining me now is Dr. Gaurav Mukhtar. She's a specialist gastroenterologist and hepatologist at Al Zahra Hospital, Dubai. Welcome to the show, Dr. Gaurav. I have so many hard words to pronounce when I'm introducing all you doctors. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for introducing me. My pleasure being here.
I hope I've pronounced your title right. Is it hepa or hepatologist?
It's hepatologist.
There you go. That will be good. I need to learn more from you doctors. So in simple terms, tell everybody, what is the role of the gut in the human body? How important is it for us?
So basically, human gut starts from your mouth and it goes down to your rectum, and it facilitates absorption of all the nutrients and the food that you intake to create what we call as your entire body. In this whole process involves a lot of hormones, a lot of enzymes, and obviously a nutritive absorptive capacity of your intestines to create what we look like today. Our gut is closely related to practically every organ of the body, which we call as brain-body, brain-gut, and brain-lung interaction.
Don't they call it
that is what it is.
Don't they call it the second brain?
You can call it a second brain, of course, yes, because there is so much going on between the brain and the gut, and one influences the presence and the behavior of the other. So yes, of course, there are trillions of neurons in and around your gut, and you wouldn't be wrong in calling it a second brain.
So how do we know if we have a healthy gut? What are the signs to look out for?
All right. So healthy gut is something when your bowel habits are good, your appetite is good, you don't have any pain abdomens, you're passing stools every day, you're nutritionally good, you don't have any anemias, and you're walking about, you're running your daily chores in a perfect manner. If you are depleted with nutrients, if you're having diarrhea, gut, bloating, abdominal discomfort, well, you need to see a gastroenterologist.
So this report that's come out, I mean, obviously you know more about it than me. I've just read it recently that some bacteria in the gut may actually impact the severity of COVID-19 infections. What is going on? Because we've heard so many things. I know it's going to take many years to find out about the after effects of COVID, but I know so many people who are still struggling. So what is the connection between the gut and the severity of COVID?
See, so what I just like to explain this by a small example. Let's say you go to a garden. You find a lot of roses, you find lilies, and you find a plethora of other flowers, and that makes it look very beautiful. Suddenly this, not so good, gardener comes in and he brings up all those cactuses, and the cactus is all that you see all over the garden. What would be the result? You would not like that garden. That's exactly what happens when COVID affects your gut. It changes the local milieu. It changes the bacteria which exists in your gut. And change of the bacteria in your gut results in alteration of the local milieu, which results in, making your gut more leaky or more permeable.
Does it affect the way that you digest food as well?
Of course. And it's not just pertains to digestion of food, but it results in, stimulation of a cascade of events that what we call technically as the cytokine storm. There is a plethora of inflammatory markers that results in, lung failures, affection of your brain, your thinking, your diarrhea, and practically every part of your body. So that's how important it is, and that's where it all starts from.
So have you been seeing people who have struggled with gut issues since having COVID? Has it been an after effect?
Of course, see, if you see percentages, almost 50% of patients who have had COVID do state that they have had some gastric symptoms at some point of time. And many of them state that, they started off with cough and cold and fever and maybe some mild alteration of gut habits, having some mild diarrhea or constipation, which they did not pay much heed to begin with. And then when the respiratory symptoms went away, they realized that their diarrhea never went away. Their nausea stayed. Or somebody came to me lately who said that, their bloating was so disturbing. And it had been almost more than 3 months post recovery from COVID. This is what we call as long COVID or the long COVID haulers, which is also known as post-acute COVID syndrome, which is something that's very intriguing for us as doctors as well.
Can COVID-19 virus trigger diseases such as irritable bowel syndrome?
Yes, of course. See, irritable bowel syndrome is a disease of your gut and your brain interaction. And it can result in continuous pain abdomens and continuous diarrheas and constipation. Any infection of the gut can trigger irritable bowel syndrome, and COVID-19 is no exception. It changes the local milieu, as I explained earlier. It affects your thinking, and moreover, we end up doing more damage by actually giving in more antibiotics, damaging the gut even more. So definitely conditions like irritable bowel syndrome can be stimulated, they can be exacerbated, and a lot of these patients keep struggling for months and years together. So yes, COVID has been found to have a direct link on that in every possible manner.
If someone is taking medicine for heartburn, is that going to increase the risk of getting severe COVID?
Of course, see, whatever nature the God, the Almighty has given us to protect us from any kind of infection. So the acidity or the acid in your stomach keeps those bacteria to a minimal level. It does not let those bacteria pass your stomach, go into your gut and cause inflammation. And when we start abusing these acid medications, somebody who's taking acid medications for long, your acid levels in the stomach actually have been brought down. And that results in those bacteria, finding a way down to your gut and cause inflammation and the whole storm. So there have been preliminary studies which say that these acid suppression medications do result in higher inflammatory markers, higher levels of, severe COVID, although we don't have conclusive evidence. But the preliminary studies do suggest that acid suppression can actually result in higher rates of severe COVID infections.
So it just literally affects so many things. I mean, what about lactose intolerance as well? Can that develop due to COVID-19 related gut issues? Because like you said, the gut manages so many things. So there's so many issues to think about.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct on that. See, our gut has an enzyme called lactase.
Yes.
And this lactase enzyme digests the milk that you take. And you would see that there are certain people who state that I just cannot take milk. The moment I have milk, I feel bloated, I have diarrhea, I have intolerances, I start burping a lot. This is what is lactose intolerance, what it is all about. Any infection which affects the gut can deplete this enzyme called lactase. And when this enzyme is not there, the lactase is not there, the ability of your intestine to digest milk becomes probably impossible. And these symptoms can actually last for weeks or even months together. So if you have these symptoms, we always suggest that cut on your milk levels. You can have yogurt, which is fermented milk, which is very good. You can have cheese, the hardened cheese, which is still tolerable because the amount of lactose is very, very less. But if you have milk products, you're bound to develop these symptoms, which can develop post-COVID as well.
We're seeing many symptoms of long COVID. I've seen several people in the past 2 weeks talk about it, even some guests. And I know still we need a lot of years to really research the after effects. What are some of the most unusual symptoms you've seen that can be considered as long COVID?
All right. See, a lot of people say that, we don't remember things. We are forgetting things so easily.
I have that regularly. I thought it was just old age, and I haven't had COVID, so I think it's old age.
See, but then people post-COVID, they say that this has been researched on a microscopic level, and it's been found that some neurons in the brain have actually been affected by the cytopathic effects of the virus.
Brain fog.
Something like from as trivial as some ulcers to losing hair to your bloating or your diarrhea that doesn't go away. I mean, a lot of patients say that, we lost our taste and it's been 6 months, it hasn't come back yet. So these are all symptoms of long COVID, which can be very non-specific. And I must say that, the more we try and research into it, the more we get lost into it, because we are still in very early stages of our research. But the preliminary research says that it's not just a virus that just comes and goes away in a few days.
So what are your top tips to end this conversation, your top tips for keeping our gut healthy, things that you even use on a daily basis?
I think living a healthy diet forms the rock bottom of any advice that I give to any of my patients, including what I follow myself. Eat healthy foods, have a lot of vitamins, naturally occurring vitamins. Don't take random herbal products. Don't take antibiotics indiscriminately until unless prescribed to you by somebody. Exercise regularly. A 30-minute of moderate intensity exercise 5 days a week is very important. Drink lots of water. Keep yourself hydrated. Practice social distancing norms. And do consult your gastroenterologist or your specialist if you have any of the red flag symptoms, if at all you ever develop so.
Okay, Dr. Gaurav, thank you so much. I haven't even fitted in 30 minutes in a week yet for my gym session. Just, you're saying 30 minutes a day, but I will try my best.
Healthy habits.
So right now it's our Health and Wellness Day, and I have Dr. Hassan Al-Mazouki. He's the co-founder and managing director at Glucare Health, and Dr. Yusuf Said, specialist internal medicine, diabetology. Come on, these words are too much for me. How do you pronounce that?
Diabetology.
Diabetology. This is why I'm not a doctor at Glucare. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
So I like to do my research as a journalist, and I've been hearing that diabetes in many ways is being called the silent pandemic, and 1 in 5 people in the UAE have it. It's also said to be 3 times deadlier than COVID. So how serious is it right now? What would you say, Dr. Yusuf?
Well, it's around 20% in the UAE which are suffering of diabetes. And there was recently coming out from the IDF a study which shows that around 60% of the people even don't know that they have diabetes. So therefore, it's really important to show the awareness to the people to do their regular checkups, especially in the UAE. Already over 30, the recommendation is to at least every 3 years to check for diabetes, because it's a silent disease, as you mentioned, and a lot of people are coming to us and they have already complications of diabetes, right? And to avoid this, it's important to really invest in prevention and make awareness for the people to do their regular checkups.
So, Dr. Hassan, Glucare's been open 2 years. What exactly is it? Is it an online app? Is it a platform? Is it a clinic? And does it mainly focus on diabetes?
Well, so Glucare is a vertically integrated disease management platform focused on metabolic health. So within that, diabetes and obesity consists of the diseases we manage. So what does vertically integrated, platform means? What we've done is essentially change the model of care for diabetes or metabolic diseases. So what we do is we've shifted your typical episodic, heavily therapeutic-based approaches, which are typically used in traditional care, and moved it to a continuous and a behavioral change approach. So that means that we are continuously managing patients. We're using behavioral changes using data. So we hyper-personalize every protocol based on the data we receive from that individual. And that's what we've done.
Is there an app where we can actually go on and measure ourselves? I thought there was something like that.
There is an app. So there is also a physical clinic. Patients come in, they'll do their checks, they'll get their labs in about 30 minutes, they'll have a conversation with the physician, they'll see all the other allied health professionals, your nutritionist, your educator, your coach. Your coach will connect you to a bunch of devices, including a continuous glucose monitor, wearables, smart scales, smart blood pressure cuffs, and you will see all that data in an app. You'll be able to engage with the team via the app. The care doesn't leave the minute the patient leaves the center. It doesn't stop. So it's a continuous approach. The disease itself continues with that patient. So why should the care stop at that point in time? And that's what we've practiced. And then we use that data to hyper-personalize the care model. We don't use a one-size-fits-all. We don't tell the patient he needs to stop eating rice and pasta and starches. We don't tell them to follow a certain exercise regimen. Instead, we look at the data that comes back based on his choices, and we try to eliminate certain things and try to keep the other things. So we're working within what we call the normative band of a patient's behavior.
So I did a report on diabetes about 12 years ago, and it was high. It's not changing. Why is it still rising here in this region in particular?
So let me ask you that question. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of us, I didn't grow up eating out. I think a lot of us eat out a lot. I don't know if that plays a part in what's in that food. I think with the heat, I know I'm talking from a personal level. I've become lazy doing exercise outside, walking. I don't want to do it. It's too hot. I've joined a gym. I think COVID's played a part in people's laziness. I think there's so much entertainment. We're just sitting on the couch more than ever. So many distractions off the phone. These are just the things that I'm thinking for myself.
Yeah, look, you're not completely incorrect. But what you've done there is kind of blame the patient. The patient is not moving. The patient is sedentary. The patient is having bad choices with food.
I'm blaming myself, no one else.
Yeah. But despite all the advances we have in healthcare, all the advances we have in therapeutics, diagnostics, education, access, why is it that this is still a problem? Why is it getting worse?
Yeah.
Why do diabetics get worse? Why are people getting more obese despite all these advances? And our approach to that is because if you look at the last 40 years of how diabetes or obesity is being managed, it's still being managed in that episodic, heavily therapeutic approach without any behavioral change.
I see. So this is what Glucare is doing. It's changing the way you...
changing behavior. It's not really only...
saying, cut your sugar, cut this, cut this. We're talking about whole lifestyle.
Exactly.
Correct.
It's about education. It's about to understand your metabolism, to understand your body, right? That's the key really where patients then can change by showing them a better insight.
Yeah, let me give you an example, Punab. So if somebody came in as an obese patient, we use medications, we do the blood tests required, but we won't tell them to change their diet initially. What we will do is we'll use a lot of the tools that we have at our disposal when it comes to disease such as diabetes, such as a continuous glucose monitor. We'll give them a monitor. We'll observe them for 2 weeks. They'll have to take photos of their food on the app. We'll see the cause and effect. What is the glycemic variability with that choice of food? And surprisingly, a lot of the foods are okay for certain patients. It really depends on the biology of the patient. And then we'll start negating the others. And then we'll put them on therapy. And then we'll try to sustain this. So the sustain aspect is one of the most important part in behavioral change. If you do not give them the data, if you don't give them agency over that data to be able to see it and to understand. And now in a world where, we have a lot more data in terms of parameters that affect metabolic disease. So we have sleep data, we have actigraphy data, we have glucose data. All of that matters. And if we collect that as a clinical team, we should be using that. No one does that.
So using this at Glucare, what results have you seen managing it this way? Have you seen a more reduction in diabetes? I mean, can you reduce it and get rid of it, or can you just reduce it?
No, you can get to remission, yes, which means that you can have normal glucose values without medication.
And have you seen good results by doing
we
this?
Have, yes.
Compared to the way I would just go to a doctor and get checked and say, cut your food?
We have, yes. Our results are great. So we have generally HbA1c, which is the average of your glucose in 3 months, reduction of 2.14, which is worldwide the best you can have. Yeah. But again, more important is that we see that our patients are changing their behavior, yes? And only then we can reach goals which are successful in long term. And this is what we are seeing, so that we are constantly reducing medications, yes? So that patients' goal should be, especially for type 2 diabetic patients or obesity patients, which is a lifestyle disease, right?
So you're trying to do it in a more holistic way, aren't you?
Exactly.
Which I agree with.
Yeah, we are a behavioral change engine. So those results that Dr. Yusuf mentioned were done with less medications.
Yeah.
Another statistic is that 94% of type 2 insulin-dependent patients who started with us after 12 months no longer needed insulin.
Amazing.
94%.
Amazing.
It's possible to do it.
Yeah. Is there a certain demographic here, be it age or gender, that are more prone to getting diabetes, or you're seeing more come into the clinic?
Well, I would say we are seeing more coming into the clinic. I have to say also that after COVID, the awareness is getting a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yes, we are having a lot of statistics showing that diabetics or obesity patients, yes, had a much more risk to die on COVID, right? So I'm seeing now, if I'm going to my community, people going outside wearing wearables, yes, any ages, right? So people are now understanding I have to do something for my health to not die on this kind of diseases, right? So therefore, it's, I think, really, really important to also not attack diabetes, pre-diabetes, which is the pre-form of diabetes. It's important to detect this type of diseases and already start there with behavioral change so that patients have a better life quality. We just talked about longevity, right, in your topic before. That's important, right, to have life quality in if you're getting older.
So you're saying that over 30, you should at least every 3 years get checked for diabetes. So if people do want to get checked, where can they find GluCare? What can they do? Do they come into the clinic? Do they book an appointment? Can they go online?
Yes, they can go online, glucare.health. They can come to the clinic. We're located in Jumeirah, our first clinic. We have everything under one roof. So we have our diabetologist, we have our lab. It's a real-time lab, so you'll get your results in 30 to 40 minutes. Our medication is there. The support staff is there. We'll onboard you. We'll give you the devices. We'll give you your wearables. It's all covered. And we'll send you off and we'll start managing you. And you'll still come every 3 months. That's the protocol for diabetes. But the care won't stop.
Okay. Well, Dr. Hassan, Dr. Youssef, thank you so much. Make sure you tune in to Afternoons with Helen Farmer every weekday at 2 p.m.
You've been listening to a Dubai Eye 103.8 podcast. To enjoy lots more from Dubai Eye in the United Arab Emirates, just go to DubaiEye1038.com or find them wherever you normally get your podcasts.